Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Henry Schein Dental Academy webinar series. My name is Adam, Marketing Specialist, and I'll be your moderator. We're excited to welcome back Christi Billquist, Director of Operations for Unitas Dental, as our speaker tonight, as she will identify which insurances to join, keep, or drop. Before we get started, we have a few reminders. At any point during the webinar, certainly feel free to submit questions via the Q&A section of your control panel, and we'll answer them live at the end of the presentation. Henry Schein is not offering CE credit for viewing or attending this presentation live or on demand. And this webinar is sponsored by Henry Schein's Dental Business Institute, as well as Unitas Dental. Christi, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. Well, it's a pleasure to be back. And hopefully having a little bit later webinar can allow more people to jump on. And so it's my hope tonight that this is worth your time and the material we go over will be relevant to you in one way or another. And I'm hoping to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So if I don't answer something that comes up along the way, jot it down and send it over to Adam, and he'll be fielding those so that we can get your questions answered tonight as well. So let's jump right in. I am Christi Billquist. I am the Director of Operations. I've been with Unitas since almost the beginning, and I'm over our basic operations. So just a little bit about us. We have been helping practices since 2011. We're in all 50 states, and we currently have over 1,000 clients. We are located in sunny Mesa, Arizona, and currently we have over 45 insurance experts working for us. So tonight, we're going to talk about 3 key elements to deciding which PPOs to join, evaluating your current PPO participation to determine what you should keep or stay with. And then if you do decide that terming or dropping a PPO is for you, some do's and don'ts about going out of network. So we're going to be talking a lot tonight about evaluating your practice as a good step into determining if this is the right thing for you. So as a free little handout you're going to get, if you go to ppooaudit.com, and all you have to do is put in your email address, you're going to get some of the information that we're going to talk about tonight. That's a good idea to get us to where we want to be. So just as a heads up that a lot of the notes are going to be available to you there. So let's jump right in to the 3 key elements of deciding which PPOs to join. So first you have to figure out, what is my goal? What is the reimbursement? And what other PPOs does it bring with it? These are 3 very important questions that you need to ask. So typically I would say this is for a mainly fee-for-service practice, or a practice that is only with a handful of PPOs, but is thinking that maybe you should go and network with more. So these are some key questions to ask about going in network. So this is for existing practices. What is your goal? So we do free consultations all the time, and some of them are fee-for-service practices that are coming to us to do an evaluation about should they go and network with PPOs, what are their options, what will that look like? And so I always ask, well, what is your goal? Because a lot of times the goal is growth, that you're wanting to attract new patients. So is it, my goal is to attract new patients? Is it to keep the current ones that I have? Or is there a particular patient base that I really want to focus on acquiring? So, and I always explain to people, going in network is not going to bring a stampede of new patients to your office. But if you are looking to keep the patients that you have and you feel like maybe you're losing them and it's impeding your growth and referrals and things like that, then it might be worth considering to keep the current patients that you have. So for new practices, again, when we do these consultations, we hear all the time from these new business owners, well, my goal is to eventually be fee for service. And that's great. And hopefully that you can make that happen. But as a brand new practice, you have to realize you have to grow. And the only way that you're going to do that is by being in network with as many PPOs as possible. So unless you invest in super aggressive marketing, or you're in an area where you really have no competition, you need to join PPOs. And so once your practice is thriving, then you can evaluate which plans that you want to consider dropping. So the other major factor is knowing what the reimbursement is, or the fee that the insurance company is going to pay you if you decide to contract with them. So every practice should have some idea of your cost per code. And again, we all know that there's a zillion codes. So do a production summary report and evaluate the codes that are your money makers and focus on those and understand what your cost is. So then when you are considering joining, you can kind of know what your break-even point is and what your profitability can still be if you decide to join a PPO and go in network. So you definitely want to negotiate with them or try. Some PPOs don't negotiate, but a lot of them do. So when you're considering going in network, you want to go until they tell you that this is the final offer and that this is, take it or leave it kind of at that point. So then you need to determine if the offer is sufficient to cover your cost and still make a profit. So understand, by going network, you go from 100% reimbursement because you get what their out of network benefits pays plus the patient portion, to a discounted rate, and evaluate how that's going to affect your current revenue. We always tell people, if you go in network, we want you to lose the least amount of money possible. So the other thing to consider when you are joining a PPO is, what other PPOs could it bring with it? So I'm just going to briefly go over the difference between a PPO and a network umbrella. So a network umbrella is a company like Zealous, Carrington, Dynamax, Connection. Those companies their whole responsibility is to contract you on a fee schedule and then lease those providers out to PPOs in their network. So PPOs do this as well. So Aetna does it, United Healthcare does it, Sun Life, United Concordia is a big one. A lot of them lease their providers to other people. So if you are a practice that's mainly fee for service and you say, I think I'm just going to join Aetna, for example, understand that Aetna, once you contract with them, is going to send your information and their fee schedule to the PPOs who lease from them. And then you could find yourself in network with more than you bargained for. So the PPO umbrellas are really good at giving you a client list. So let's say this applies to your state and you decide to sign up with Zealous. They're going to give you this client list, and you can look at it and say, okay, Guardian's on here. I actually am contracted with Guardian. So that is going to be a primary relationship to Zealous entering the picture. But if I'm not with Cigna, for example, then it's very likely that Zealous is going to lease me to Cigna, because you can see they're on the list here. And now I know signing up with them gets me anything on the list that I'm not already with. So unfortunately, PPOs are less transparent and frankly knowledgeable about what PPOs may fall under their contract. So it's a really good idea, if you are considering just joining one or two PPOs or a network umbrella, to make sure that you really understand all the PPOs that could be coming with it, and know that you have the option to what's called opt out. So in that example I gave of signing up with Aetna, if you decided I only want to be with Aetna, then when you send in your contract, you can send a letter along with it saying, I don't want to be leased to additional PPOs in the network. Now, some of them will make you list all those PPOs specifically, so it doesn't include anybody that they may in the future lease to. So it's something you just kind of always want to be aware of. So we're going to finish up that first here with a little bit of comic relief. So the Far Side is my favorite cartoon ever. That probably dates me a little bit, but this one came up on my little daily calendar the other day and thought everyone else would get a kick out of it too. So, all right. So let's talk about, should you stay in network and how to evaluate your current in-network PPO participation. So let's say we're past that first part, you're in network with PPOs and you're trying to decide if you should stay either with some or all. So again, the analysis that it's really important to conduct to help you make an educated decision is available, regardless really if you're considering going out of network or not. This is a great outline of some step-by-step procedures that every practice should do at least once a year of auditing your PPO participation so that you really have a clear and accurate picture of what your participation is, what your reimbursements are, and how that is affecting your practice. All right, so let's talk about 3 reasons that offices decide to drop or not keep a PPO. Number 1, the fees are too low. That's probably the biggest reason. Also, the insurance company is extremely difficult to work with and costs the practice more in time and manpower to continually work to resolve the issues. We get some offices that come to us and we do an evaluation up front of what you're in network with, what you're out of network with, and we go over that and we'll say, I noticed that you're out of network with XYZ PPO. Do you want me to negotiate a proposal to see what it would look like to go in network? And sometimes they'll say, no way. I don't care if they pay me 100% of my UCR. I do not want to be in network with this PPO because they're a nightmare to work with. So if you're a dentist watching this, check in with your staff to determine, when you're doing an overall evaluation of whether you should keep or drop a PPO, are they just so difficult to work with that it's just not worth the amount of time and frustration that you're having to put into resolve issues. And then the third reason is the practice is thriving. You don't need to grow and you're working towards being fee for service. So let's talk about low fees reimbursements from the insurance companies. So part of that audit, if you go to that web address I gave you and download our free audit, the 4 steps for an audit, is going to tell you need to call or go to your portals and download all of your current fee schedules. So this is super important because you want to make sure that you know what you're working with, what is your most current fee schedule, and is that the fee schedule that's in your practice management software? If not, that could be throwing things off too and making things seem different than they really are. So make sure that you have the correct fee schedule, and so you know that you're working off of facts and not just assumptions. Also, before you just drop a PPO because the fees are too low, have you tried to negotiate your fees? Now, like I said before, some PPOs will negotiate, some won't. Delta does not have a history of negotiating, but you should still ask because the answer is always going to be no if nobody asks. So the first step is to try and negotiate those fee schedules that you're on, because maybe you can negotiate them up to something that's more acceptable, especially if you tell them, I'm considering, and don't pretend like, because they might call your bluff, but if you're really considering going out of network, then, let them know these fees are too low. So we're really considering whether to stay in network with XYZ or drop. So is there anything you can do to make our fees more compensatory to our actual cost of doing business that would allow us to stay in network? So try negotiating your fees before you drop. And then if they're still lower than your cost of doing business or lower than you want to take, then certainly consider dropping them. But also, you may want to consider outsourcing a review of your PPO management for negotiations and optimization. So this is our little pitch. This is what we do. Negotiations are pretty straightforward. Optimization, on the other hand, is a lot more tricky and not something I recommend an office trying to do on their own. So what do I mean by optimization? That's where we move how you're participating from one contract to something that pays higher. So that client list that I showed you earlier from Zealous shows some PPOs that they lease to. So if you were to term a contract with a PPO that you're directly contracted with that's on that list, and you're also with Zealous, then your in-network participation would likely shift from that direct contract over to Zealous. So that's a really simplified version of what I mean by moving around how you participate. Because there are about 4 to 6 umbrella networks, depending on what state you're in, that sometimes can be very viable over a direct contract. But maybe a PPO leases to another PPO, and that's a better option than how you're currently in network, because this leasing and is so prevalent that there are so many different ways that you can be in network. Then companies like us can help you know what those options are, what the risks are, what patients you get, what you don't get. But a lot of times that's how you can make a lot more money off of your insured patients, by just moving how you're participating, in addition to trying to negotiate those fees. So I'm just going to show you a few of our success stories here. This is Dr. Morgan in North Carolina. We negotiated 5 of his PPO contracts, and then we optimized 2 networks. So that means we shifted how he was participating with 2 PPOs for a combined ROI of $64,000. And these ROIs are super conservative because they're just based on 35 codes done 10 times. So if some of these are busy PPOs for you, or if you have multiple providers and really high production, then these are pretty conservative. Dr. Redford in California, we negotiated 3 PPO contracts and optimized 2 for $78,000. Dr. Baker in Texas, we negotiated 5 PPO contracts and completed 3 optimizations for $79,000. And I should say too that a lot of times the ROI depends on choices the practice makes. So let's say in Dr. Baker's case, he chose to only do one of the optimizations that we recommended. That's totally fine. Then obviously this ROI is going to be a little bit less. But when people say, well, what kind of return is there? I always say it really depends, A, how you come to us, and B, what decisions you make for your practice as far as moving things around, because it can make some people a little bit nervous to do that. And a lot of times we do one and it goes great, and so then we move to the next one and it's more of a process. But again, here's Dr. Young in Florida. We were able to negotiate quite a few and do some moving around to benefit Dr. Young. So reason number 2, like we talked about, difficult PPOs. If you are spending too much time, wasting your time and frustration, then that's something to take into consideration when determining if you're going to stay with a PPO. And then reason number 3. So this, of course, is every dentist's dream, is working towards being fee for service. And we've helped several of our clients get there. It's definitely a process. But if you are PPO driven, it's probably something that you need to focus on marketing or other aspects to get there. But if your practice is thriving and you actually need to curb some growth and maximize your chair time, then you want to consider dropping lower paying PPOs. So those patients most likely stay, but they stay at full price. So again, determining if fee for service could work for you, you first, I would say, need to be booked out pretty far, or you're losing a provider and you're not planning on replacing them, or something like that, where you really need to maximize who's in your chair. Then you have that luxury of starting to determine if working towards fee for service is the right thing for your practice. Okay, so our next comic relief before we move on to the next one. All right. So the do's and don'ts of going out of network. So you've done the evaluation, the audit that we're offering for free, the step-by-step audit, and you've decided that you're going to drop one or more of your PPOs. You definitely want to complete that evaluation and really understand your participation and your fees. And like I said, at a minimum, try to negotiate or try and negotiate and optimize before you get there. But let's say you've got there and you're ready. So again, here's that address, www.ppoaudit.com, for you to get those free steps. So let's talk about the do's and don'ts of first evaluating whether you can drop a PPO. So we are very fee oriented here, not necessarily patient oriented. Start with the fee and go to patient base second. So focus first on your lower paying PPOs. So that's why you need to do that audit and that evaluation first, so you really know what your lowest paying PPOs are. So be very realistic about the impact it could have on your practice. Every practice is different. And use your practice management software to identify the patients that it's going to affect. Can you afford to potentially lose these patients and then also stunt growth for patients with this PPO? If the answer is yes, then that's a green light. Definitely have a plan. Set up a plan of, okay, let's start with this PPO and see how that goes, and make sure everybody is on board. And if you navigate that well, then okay, what's next on our list? What do we want to try going out of network next? So don't drop a plan just because you only have a few patients on it. I read a lot of courses or information people put out about going out of network. And for some reason, that's always something people say is, if you don't have a lot of patients, drop them. And I don't understand that, because patient base changes. One employer group, let's say you don't have very many patients under XYZ insurance. So you decide, well, I'm going to drop them because it won't affect very many patients. But what if next year your school district changes to XYZ insurance and now you're out of network? So there's no harm in just being a network, even if you only have a few patients on that plan. Focus on fees first and patient base second. So it doesn't make sense just because you only have a few patients that will be affected to drop it. If you're getting a decent reimbursement from that PPO, then I would put more value on that over I only have a few patients. So you do want to be very specific. If you decide to send that termination notice in to the insurance company, you want to be very specific about why you're terming. So the termination process varies by PPO. Some have a form that you fill out, and some you just can send in a letter or an email, and then they all react differently. So there are some that will call the office and just verify that that is your intent to terminate your direct contract. And sometimes they'll counter offer with a fee increase. So it may even be a PPO that you tried to negotiate with and they told you no. And then when you actually send in the term, then sometimes that's when they will come to the table and say, don't leave. How about a higher fee schedule? So that's what I talked about before about calling your bluff. So don't say that you're going to term unless that is something you're actually considering, because you want to give them the opportunity to keep you. If a higher fee schedule can do that and they're willing to offer it, then give them that opportunity. It's been my experience that a lot of times those last ditch efforts are not a big offering. So be prepared to know in your head, if they do counter your term with a fee increase, to evaluate that and decide, okay, well, this is worth staying, or still not enough. Let's go ahead and go through with the term. So we talked a little bit before about networking and leasing, and how sometimes you can be a network potentially under a lot of different options. So don't assume that dropping a plan means that you'll be out of network. So for example, if you decided to term your direct contract with Principal, They also lease providers from Aetna, Emeritus, United Concordia, and several of the network umbrella companies. So your PAR will likely just shift to something else rather than them. So maybe that's what you want. But if you're just saying, I don't want to be in network with Principal, but let's say you are in network with Aetna, just be aware that it's possible that once that term processes, that they'll actually move your participation over to Aetna instead of actually putting you out of network. So the companies store all that information and get monthly updates from each other. So so depending on your reason for going out of network with a certain patient base, just be aware that you're going to watch those EOBs after that 90 days or whatever term date they give you is up to make sure that you're actually out of network. And it's really easy to tell. First, you can call provider relations and they'll tell you. Sometimes you get the right answer and sometimes you don't, because it depends how you phrase it, so that they look to see if there are those networking and leasing options in place. But you'll know for sure on an EOB. I always say the proof is in the EOB. It will say on there whether the provider that you build out under, if that claim is processed in network or out of network. So let's say you do decide to term with XYZ insurance. You want to get something in writing of what that term date is. And usually it's 90 days from when they receive your request to term. So let's say it's a PPO that uses a specific form that you fill out and sign and send in, and they received that on June 1st. Then typically they will process that and give you a term date 90 days from when they received that. So you would still be in network June, July, August, because that's about 90 days from when they received that request on June 1st. And then you're disconnected from that PPO and you're not in network, unless the scenario that we just talked about occurs. But if you send in a term and you haven't heard anything back, then definitely follow up, because sometimes those get lost by the PPOs, because again, you're breaking up with them. So sometimes those do get lost and require a little bit of follow-up or resubmitting. All right. So this is probably the most important thing, is to determine as a team, as a practice, how you're going to communicate and interact with your patients about going out of network, being out of network, both of those. So are you going to call those patients and explain? Are you going to send out mass emails or letters? You do need to be aware that there's probably in some states some offense that needs to be happening here, because there are some states, New Jersey, Connecticut come to mind, that have statutes that require the insurance companies to notify patients if you're going out of network. So if you've sent a term to XYZ Insurance, they're going to send a letter to all your patients, one for each provider, and notify them that you're going to be out of network after a certain date. Some are even really helpful and give them a list of providers who are in network to try and steer them to in-network providers. So that's fine. You just need to be aware that that's a possibility that can happen. So you really want your patients to hear from you first that you've decided to go out of network, and explain why. We have a letter that we provide to our clients. It's a really good explanation as to why they might be going out of network, so that it helps educate their patients on why they've chosen to do that and what it's going to look like for the patient. So you do want to explain to them why you're dropping their plan. Don't disparage their insurance, but help them understand that their plan doesn't cover the cost of providing quality care, and that you're not willing to use a crappy lab or supplies from who knows where, that your materials from who knows where. You don't want to have to cut corners on the quality care that you provide. So you definitely don't want to say, yeah, your plan is crap and it doesn't pay anything. Like, you don't want to disparage that for sure. So again, this is where having a plan and some maybe role play dialogue comes in for your staff, in knowing how to explain that to clients, to patients, that you're no longer with their PPOs. So always be truthful, verify out of network benefits ahead of time. All plans out of network benefits are different, even within the same PPO. So you need to be straightforward. You're going to make your patients really frustrated if you don't tell them that you're now out of network and now they've got some out of pocket expenses that they wouldn't have incurred going to an in-network provider. That needs to be their choice. So you can easily verify ahead of time what those out of network benefits look like for those patients, and don't make assumptions. So just because you had a Metlife patient come in that paid 80% as their out of network benefit, that the next Metlife patient has the same out of network benefits. Out of network benefits vary by the plan that that employer chooses. And even within an employer, sometimes someone at an executive level might have a better package than somebody at a lower level. So you want to make sure that that's due diligence for each individual patient. So something to consider when going out of network is the little bit extra effort it's going to take initially with patients to verify those out of network benefits. Okay, make sure patients know they can still come to you and what that means for them financially. This is a big misunderstanding for patients, that they think, oh, if my provider's out of network, I can't go to them. Unless they have an EPO or zero out of network benefits, and they can still make that choice to come to you if they want to pay full out of pocket. But most patients have some sort of plan that has out of network benefits. So sometimes, usually that means a little bit more out of pocket for them after what their out of network benefits pays. But some insurance companies will also lower their annual maximum. So they might say you have $1,500 if you go to in-network providers, and you have $1,000 if you go to out-of-network providers. And then if you do have patients that say, fine, I'm going to a different dentist, just be understanding of people's financial situations, and it's not personal, but they might feel like they can, that's their choice, is to go to an in-network doctor. But tell them, we totally understand, but we'll always welcome you back should you choose to return. I worked with an office in California that slowly dropped PPO after PPO after PPO. And it was a great experience for them because they did it in a process. And, the office manager told me, we had some people say, I'm leaving. And she said almost all of them ended up coming back because Dr. John is such a great dentist and everybody loves him, that they realized that, a few dollars out of pocket really wasn't a big deal to keep a dentist that they were comfortable with and that they loved coming to. So again, don't take it personally if they say I'm switching providers. Just say, we totally understand, but we'll welcome you back if you choose to return. All right, so if you're looking to negotiate and optimize your PPOs, then feel free to go to unitashsd.com, Henry Schein Dental, Unitas HSD, and you can schedule a free call with us. You actually speak with our account managers, so they're super knowledgeable in answering your questions that you have to see if our service is right for you. We have a flashlight service. So if you're a fee-for-service office, then what we do is we negotiate proposals on your behalf, and we outline all the options that you have for going in network. We don't sign you up with anything. We're not pushing PPOs. There's no obligation. It's just a look-see. That's why we call it a flashlight into what it would look like if you wanted to add PPOs. This is common for practices where a parent has a kid graduating from dental school and they're going to be coming in, but they need to keep them busy. So they decide, well, I'm going to stay out of network, but probably, put this new dentist in network to try and grow some patients. Or you just feel like you need to grow your practice, or there's specific PPOs that you want to target going in network with. That's our flashlight product. Practice Start is for new practices out there. So if you're looking to join PPOs at a new location, there's definitely a strategy to doing that. And we do everything for you. We negotiate, we show you your options, we do the credentialing, the follow-up, everything. So it's a really great service. And then PPO management is for existing practices. You're already with a bunch of PPOs and you're scratching your head trying to figure out what am I getting paid? How am I participating? Because if you have multiple providers, it's really possible that you're participating differently. So there's no obligation to sign up, but if you just want to see if what we have to offer might be a fit for you, then certainly go there and schedule a free consultation for a time that's going to work best for you. And then again, if you wanted to download that guide to evaluate and audit your current PPO participation, that's at ppoaudit.com. All right, so that is everything. And we have time for questions, Adam. So whenever you're ready.
Lots of questions, lots of time. So if you got them, drop them in the chat or Q&A, and let's get right to it. Let's see. If you're in network with a company and you're affiliating with a company like Zealous, and the Zealous fee schedule is better than the company you're directly in contract with, how do you go about receiving that better fee schedule?
So short answer is you have to term the direct contract that you're with, but it's not always that straightforward. There are some PPOs that will make you wait a year before they will pick you back up under an optimization or under a network umbrella. So in this question example of Zealous, it really depends on what PPO you are looking to move over to Zealous. This is why I'm saying it's something that it's really hard for you to just do on your own, because there's so many different little variables to know and understand. And sometimes it's state specific on top of that. So the short answer is you have to sever that direct contract. Then they'll go looking for you. How can I pick this doctor up? We're separated from that direct contract. So kind of free agent. Where can I pick them back up? Oh, look, there's a Zealous contract in place. So they'll pick you up under Zealous, and then your claims start processing under the Zealous fee schedule.
Is your current fee schedule found on the insurance portal when you log in? And if so, is that true for all of them?
So yes, if you're able to access it on the portal, more and more of them are getting smarter and doing it that way to make it really easy for you. So yes, that should be an accurate reflection that you can trust, that if you pull it out of the portal, that those are the fees that are assigned to you. So if you don't have, if you haven't set up a portal or you can't find it in the portal, just call provider relations and they'll either email it or fax it to you.
Can PPOs opt out of using an umbrella network with an office that cancels their direct contract with the PPO?
Yes. So it's not a sure thing. So going back to that list example that I gave you of Zealous's client list, for example, yeah, certainly we have seen where sometimes they don't pick you back up, or like I said, there's a waiting period, but for the most part, they will pick you up under something. It might not be what you think it's going to be because you're not aware, oh yeah, they lease from Aetna, and I thought it was going to fall under Zealous, but I didn't opt out under Aetna. So they look for the path of, cheapest reimbursement. And unless you block the cheaper paths, then, to get to the Zealous, then it could end up someplace you didn't intend for it to be. But understand that with PPOs, their goal is to have you in network for two reasons. They want to reprice claims and take that discount, and they want a robust network. When they're out selling their plans, they have to have a certain number of providers in order to sell the plan. So that's kind of how this leasing and networking began, because if a certain PPO couldn't get enough doctors to sign up organically, then they kind of backdoor it by grabbing that dentist through something else that they're in network with that company leases from.
Let's see. Can you just answered that? What advice do you have for dropping Delta Dental or United Concordia, especially since they carry the military? How do you optimize United Concordia?
Okay, good questions. And I should have included that in my slides. So the Delta, that's a good point. Here's what you need to keep in mind with Delta and why it's really hard to get out of network with them is they will send payment to the patient. So that becomes a little tricky to navigate. It's possible. We don't see it all that often, but if you do go out of network with Delta, it's a huge patient base in most places. and they will always send payment to the patient and try and steer those patients to in-network providers. So it can be done, but it is tricky and difficult. With United Concordia, you have to understand it's really a leasing arrangement with the Department of Defense. United Concordia does not administer those military plans. The Department of Defense does, DoD. That's what the fee schedule says. So basically, they use United Concordia to get to providers, but really it's just another leasing situation. You can be in network with TRICARE and ADDP, those military plans, and not be in network with United Concordia, and vice versa. It's just that was a method that the DoD used to piggyback and pick up a lot of providers when they made that switch back over to United Concordia. But it's not United Concordia proper. It's a separate fee schedule. You'll have a United Concordia fee schedule for those patients, and you will have a separate fee schedule for your military Department of Defense. And neither one of them have a history of negotiating. So with DoD, that's really straightforward, like Delta. It's take it or leave it. We don't network with anyone, we don't lease from anyone, and we don't negotiate. So it is what it is. With United Concordia, there are options if you termed that direct contract that some of those patients, and again, we're talking just United Concordia, not DoD, not military, just card carrying United Concordia patients, they do lease from other PPOs and network umbrellas for some of their patients.
Does Unitas work with Medicaid or other state insurance plans, or do you just do PPO plans?
We just do PPOs. We don't do Medicaid and we don't do DHMOs.
All right, that knocks out a couple questions.
Not that DHMOs don't negotiate. I will put that plug in there. If you are with DHMOs and you want to try and negotiate, that's something you should certainly try. There are success stories out there. We don't get involved in those just because DHMOs are so complicated. It doesn't make sense to have a middleman in that whole process. That really needs to be a contract that is between the provider and the DHMO, so you know exactly what you're getting. When you're signing up, you have to do a site visit, all this kind of stuff. So that's why we don't do DHMOs, not that you might not have success. So if you are on those plans, then certainly try and negotiate those as well. It's just not part of our service.
If you are taking a certain PPO and want to continue staying with them because you want to keep your old patients, can you tell new patients with that specific PPO that you're not accepting new patients with that specific PPO?
I don't know. That's a good question. I know with DHMOs you can't, because those are capitation patients that you're getting paid for. I know that some practices, so in a situation, let's say you're military heavy, and like we talked about, there's that Department of Defense fee schedule, and it is garbage. It's really low fees, the lowest fees you'll probably ever see. They're super low fees, but you feel really patriotic, or you've been in the military, so you really want to be on those plans. But let's say nobody else in your area, it feels that way, and they say these fees are garbage, I'm not going to be contracted, and so you're the only provider in network. So what that's going to do is send a slew of these patients on low paying plans to you. So what you can do is say we see those patients on Wednesdays, or we see those patients on Fridays. So that way, if you can't get them in for a while, then they might go look someplace else if you're wanting to curb those patients. If it's a PPO, you would want to call and ask them specifically, because I know on some websites it will say currently taking new patients, yes or no. So I believe the option is there, but it's probably better for you to just try and curb that. Or if you don't want to take new patients, then just kind of have an inside rule of we book those on Wednesdays, or we book those on Fridays, or whatever, to kind of not have it inundate your chair time.
This is a question we get with every Unitas webinar, but can you negotiate fees for specialty offices?
Oh, yes. That's where we do our best work, because I'll tell you, most direct contracts for specialists are terrible because some of them don't differentiate between a GP and a specialist. This is just the fee schedule, and they take that into consideration into the specialty codes already, supposedly. So with specialists, optimizing is really orthodontics. You're weird how they treat you, insurance treats you, and pick stuff up. So that's a whole different animal. But every other specialty, yes, there's definitely a lot we can do if you're willing to play the optimization game. Because if you're on a lot of direct contracts, then usually there's much higher fees available to you through third parties.
How can you keep a new associate in network if the primary doctor comes out of network?
Because each doctor is individually contracted. So with rare exception, the owner doctor has to be contracted. I know like in Florida with Delta, the owner doctor has to be contracted, but those are really some rare exceptions. For the most part, you can have one provider be in network and one out of network. Now, what you need to keep in mind is there are some, like Dentamax, for example, uses this, what I call a net approach. So let's say you've got 3 providers in a practice and you say, I only want this one to be contracted with Dentamax. What their contract says is anybody that bills out under that tax ID number, we can throw in network. And Dentamax is a huge network. Almost everyone leases from them. So that's something you want to be aware of in saying, I want this doctor in network and this one out of network. It's definitely possible, but understand that there are some in the contract that say anybody under this 10 can be thrown in network.
I don't understand why insurance companies, especially Delta, are so resistant to negotiate. Aren't we the customer?
Because that gets them more money. I mean, it's they are businesses too, and their whole goal is to make a profit. And so if the premiums that they get are here and the payout is here, then that's a huge profit for them. So I will tell you, it's a universal frustration. My own dentist here in Arizona sent me their new fee schedule, and I'm trying to remember, I want to say it was a 13% decrease in their fee schedule, which is so disappointing because obviously with the last year, nobody's costs went down, and I can guarantee you they didn't lower premiums. So, it's just because they can, honestly.
How often can you renegotiate PPOs?
So it's between 2 and 3 years. Some of them used to do it every year. And as the whole art of negotiating caught on, a lot of them have made adjustments. And so some of them it's every 24 months, and some of them, especially if they have to give a little bit bigger bump than they were planning on, might say, okay, then this fee schedule is good for 36 months. And the 24 months is just, this is when you can ask. It doesn't mean they're going to give you an increase. It's just a lot of times when they'll even do a review. Cigna, for example, is really strict on that 24 months. So don't even come back to them unless it's been 2 years since you've been on your current fee schedule for them to do a review. And that's not a guarantee that they're going to give you an increase. It's just that's when they're willing to do a fee review. So general rule, 2 years. Some of them are moving more towards the 36 months, the 3 years.
Can you run through the patient value calculation that determines whether it makes financial sense to be in or out?
Yeah, it's just going back to knowing what your cost of doing business is for a code. So again, you're going to want to run a production summary and really focus on what are my top maybe 20 codes, because it's, for most practices, that's where the bulk of your revenue comes from anyway, maybe even fewer. So you want to focus on understanding what your cost of doing business is. What are your lab fees? What is your overhead? Take that all into consideration and then compare it to the reimbursements that you're getting from PPOs. And that's how you determine what your profitability is in being in network with that PPO, because you're comparing, this is what my cost is, and this is what I'm getting. So what kind of profit margin do I get here?
Got a lot of requests asking what Unitas's fees are if you decide to help customers.
So it depends on the product. But for our PPO management for existing practices that come on board, our current pricing is $4.99 a month for a year. And after that, you can stay on. If you still want us to work on it, we should be able to wrap everything up in 12 months. But usually, if they stay on longer, it's because they want us to keep doing more optimization or go out of network, things like that. And that does include one provider. So if you have additional providers, there is a small fee for each additional provider. It's just a one-time fee. And our service includes re-credentialing and credentialing. So if we recommend that you join a network so that we can optimize and move you over, we do all that paperwork for you, submitting it, follow up, all of that.
If I am in network and open a second location in a different city, will the fee be the same or will it differ based on the location?
Maybe. And it also depends if you're going to open that second location under the same tax ID number or a new tax ID number. So if that's something you're planning on doing, you probably want to schedule a call with us. We do a lot of free educating, so we're happy to help answer questions and give advice if you're in that situation too. So it depends. If you're opening that second location under the same tax ID number, and if it's kind of, metro area instead of rural and metro, then it really just depends how far apart those offices are and how they've structured their fee schedules. If you've got a practice in Las Vegas and you're going to open an office in Elko, Nevada, then no, you're definitely not going to be on the same fee schedules. Potentially, maybe in rare instances, but it depends on how far apart those offices are and a few other factors, but also if you're going to open that under the same tax ID number or a whole new entity.
Another question that we often get is, can PPOs decrease your fees without your knowledge?
Can they? Yes, it's a contract. This is a voluntary thing that you can be a part of. To your knowledge, they're pretty open about lowering fees, and we are seeing that. Last year, Aetna sent out letters lowering people's fee schedules and then giving them a cash out for depending on what their production has been with Aetna. Aetna's trying to position themselves as a network. And so they were going in and lowering people's fee schedules and basically saying, sign this and we'll send you this cash out check. If you don't sign it, we're still going to lower your fee schedule. And so we had some of our offices push back and some of them were able to keep that fee schedule that they were on originally. But yes, we are seeing where some are coming in and actually lowering your fee schedule, but they will notify you. So saying nobody told me, it's probably unlikely that they didn't try to tell you. It's just either it got ignored or letter that didn't get opened or something like that. But that's why going back to this, this free little 4 steps that we're giving you is telling you that that's something that you need to be ongoing, is auditing your PPOs for what the payout is. Because it could be that they've lowered your fee schedule, or it could be that there's some glitch in the system, or you negotiated an increase and they didn't get that fee schedule loaded on the back end. A lot of these companies have 2 completely different systems with claims and provider relations. So it's something that you always want to keep up on. So yes, they can lower the fee schedules. So again, your option is then saying, fine, then I'm going to term because I can't make money on these fees. Or like I said, coming to a company like us and looking and saying, well, maybe there's a different way that I can participate through a third party that's going to get me more money.
Staying on that track of frequently asked questions in Unitas webinars, is it possible to negotiate Delta PPO fees with Delta?
I've never seen it. There are legends out there, but I've never seen it. If anybody from a company like ours tells you it's possible or that they've seen it, I would be really skeptical. I've been here since 2011 and I've never seen Delta PPO deviate from a PPO fee schedule. Premier fees is a different story because Premier is administered differently in each state. So depending on your state, sometimes the Premier fees are negotiable, or you do what's called a fee filing, which basically you submit your fees and they create a fee schedule based on what your office fees are. But for Delta PPO, unfortunately, it's take it or leave it.
Do sole providers have less leverage than small or large group practices?
Not necessarily, because anymore, for the insurance companies to think of you as a group, you have to be pretty big. So it's really not uncommon anymore for providers to have 3, 6, 7, 10 locations. And that really isn't anything more to the insurance companies than a single provider, single location. So the leverage just comes more in keeping up on it. Like every 2 years you're going and asking and trying to get more. That's where the leverage is just asking, honestly, or hiring a company like us to come in and negotiate and optimize what your current participation is.
In your opinion, who is the best person in the office to have the out-of-network conversation with a patient?
Who your best communicator is. Because it's going to vary by practice. Sometimes if you have, it's really who's going to have the gift of it, honestly. Is your office manager the one that has the relationship with everyone in the office, or is it the dentist that has the relationship with the patient in the office? Bandwidth wise, it's probably going to be your office manager or insurance coordinator, just because that's a lot of phone calls to make or a lot of, emails to send, but that's going to be up to, I guess, individual providers if they want to take that on themselves. I'm sure it can be maybe a little more meaningful for the patients to hear it from you, but then, you also have the maybe backlash or whining or whatever. So you have to just kind of decide if you're going to do that. But I really strongly recommend role playing. It sounds awkward and nobody likes doing it, but it's actually a really good way to kind of work those scenarios out and how you're going to say it. And once you start and you get comfortable with it, then you kind of learn the right way to do it. And if you know your patients already, kind of the best way to communicate that to them, that you've decided to go out of network. But that decision is going to be on a case by case basis on probably who has a good relationship with that patient, and do they have a good word track that they've practiced, that they know and feel confident. Because you don't want to come in and say, yeah, I know, I should take it, but I just if you've got this fancy car out in the driveway, they might be like, well, how much money do you need? And stuff like that. So you just really need to be prepared for the different responses that you could get from patients, but be confident in the reason why you're going out of network, which we talked about could be a number of different reasons. So maybe you just don't need to be beholden to them to keep patients, because you're a thriving practice and you just don't need to. So, educating patients goes a long way, because dental insurance really isn't insurance like traditional insurance is. It's really just them buying a discount off of, dental procedures. So part of it is educating them on what dental insurance really is and what it's not, and what it still means going to an out-of-network provider.
If we're a GP office but have specialty services, can we be in network with the GP but the specialty is out of network?
Yeah, that happens all the time. Or the specialty is only in network with a couple PPOs and not the depth of what the GPs are, then yeah, certainly they can choose to remain out of network. You just want to keep in mind, like I said, companies like Dentamax, if you have your GP in network, and you bill that specialist under that tax ID number, even though their NPI is the treating physician, they might take that net approach and say, any NPI that bills out under this tax ID number, we potentially could add them in network. So just keep that in mind.
We became out of network with Cigna last year, and we noticed that we started getting checks from Zealous. Does that mean that we were leased out?
Yes, it means you're not out of network. It means that for DPPO patients, your in-network participation moved over to Zealous, and you became out of network for Advantage patients. Advantage patients do not get picked up under a third-party leasing situation. So some of your claims are going to process out of network, and some of them are going to process under Zealous. If you want to be completely out of network with Cigna, then you need to send a letter to Zealous opting out of Cigna under Zealous.
All right, we're at the top of the hour. We got a lot of questions left. Do you have a couple more minutes?
I do, yeah.
Perfect. Have you successfully negotiated an increase with Metlife?
Less than this. Yes. Yeah. And actually we're seeing more of it. It's super rare, more often with specialists, but it can happen. We still ask. we still push, but what our benefit with Metlife usually ends up being is optimizing, moving you out of a direct contract into a leasing situation.
Oh, let's see. How far booked should your schedule in hygiene be before you start considering to drop a PPO?
Probably at least a couple months to start, to dip your toe in the water. Here's the other thing too, I should have put in the slides, is you can always go back and network. So if you feel like we just want to try this, we're just going to try this, like that office that we just talked with, Cigna. We're just going to try terming Cigna and see how it goes. So let's say you do that and it's a nightmare, it's not working, you're losing patients, whatever, then guess what? You can always sign right back up with them and they're going to put you back on the fee schedule that you were on. So that there's always kind of that little safety net that they're always going to welcome you back. They want that prodigal son back. So if you decide that it's not working, you can always sign back up, fill out the application, get right back in network. But at the same time, just be cognizant that they may, you might be shifting over to something else when you do that term.
We have 3 practices with 1 tax ID with 9 providers. Would that cost be one fee or not?
So we charge by location, and then there's the additional provider fee. So in that instance, what we do is just get more information from you on the consultation, and then we come up with custom pricing for something like that.
There has been chatter in the dental community for quite a while that Delta Dental is getting rid of their premier fee schedule. Have you heard anything along that line?
Absolutely. And again, it just depends on the state. California was the first, maybe it's been 5 or 6 years ago now, that changed their contract so that you can't even be a premier only provider. You have to be PPO and premier. So if you were a premier only doctor and you failed to do a recred and you went out of network and you had to sign back up, you had to sign up PPO and premier. If you're a premier only provider and you hire an associate, that associate has to be PPO and premier. So what happens is when you're both PPO and premier, most claims get paid under the PPO fee schedule because patients' plans are what we call Delta Plus. That means that they're going to get paid under the lowest contracted fee schedule. So if they go to a premier only doctor, they're considered a premier patient. If they go to a PPO and premier doctor, they're considered a PPO patient. So in California, they say we haven't sold a premium or a premier plan in years. So there are fewer of those true premier patients left. But yeah, it depends on the state because we've seen it in Texas. We've seen it in lots of states where they're slowly going through and saying, you have to be PPO and premier. Little tidbit of information here in Arizona, we're the only state where there is no PPO and premier. There is Delta exclusive, where if you agree to be just a Delta provider, you get higher fees. And if you take any other PPOs, then here's your fee schedule. And there is no differentiation between PPO and Premier. So it varies in every single state how they address PPO and Premier and whether you have to be with both, if they're even selling the Premier product anymore, and then how they create a fee schedule for Premier.
If you sell your practice, can or will the PPO fee schedules that you contract with survive the sale?
Yes, but that might not be a good thing. It really just depends. If you've been on the same Cigna fee schedule for 10 years, then somebody buying that practice might want a new one. But Cigna is one where they'll say they're going to grandfather you into that fee schedule. So you may or may not want that. If they've been on that same fee schedule for years, you probably want a 2021 fee schedule and not the one that the practice has been on. So again, it just comes with, that's when a consultation with us can be really helpful because we can do a lot of, finding out what the actual situation is. Are you selling it to an associate that's currently working at the practice or to somebody completely different? Or are you buying a practice that is with some PPOs? Because I'll tell you, it's really, really rare for a buying doctor to have a clue what the PPO reimbursements are from the selling doctor. They're lucky if they even know what PPOs that they're in network with, or how PPOs even work sometimes, because they've been an associate, they haven't had to really know and understand. So this is a whole new world. So sometimes, yes, they will just carry over that fee schedule to the next doctor coming on board. Or a lot of times what they'll do is just give them a street level 2021 fee schedule that probably has potential for negotiation.
Got a couple questions about Dentamax. Should they be getting out of Dentamax? Do you recommend coming out of the Dentamax network?
So that's going to be on a state-by-state basis. Connecticut, for example, if you're in Connecticut, that's how your Medicaid, Medicare is processed. So you don't really have a choice unless you want to be out of network with them. So here in Arizona, we have a couple big casinos that only go through Dentamax. So you have to be willing to be out of network with those patients if you drop Dentamax. They're a huge network because it's actually networks within networks. So, if you're considering dropping Dentamax, you just need to understand that there might be a few smaller TPAs or insurances that don't fall under anything else because they only use Dentamax. There is no direct contract and they don't network with anyone else. So that's your only avenue, is through Dentamax. So you just need to be aware of that if you decide that you want to term with them.
Let's see. We're a new office that is fee for service. Is it easier to sign up with PPOs, and how long would it take to sign up?
So it just depends. If you go through our flashlight product, that takes about 60 to 90 days for us to negotiate final offers for everything. And then what we're going to do is go PPO by PPO and say, okay, here's Aetna. Here's your options. Here's what they're offering you on a direct contract. Here's Aetna under another PPO that pays pretty decent. And here's Aetna under a network umbrella company. And this is how long it's going to take, because networking always takes quite a while. That's one of the drawbacks of initially going in network through a leasing situation, is that can take a few months for that to fall into place. And sometimes you don't always get all patients when you're going through a third party and a leasing. So it really just depends. Direct contracts go pretty quick. If you've already been in network with that PPO in that state recently, then it's going to be 30, 60 days max for you to get in network. If you haven't contracted with them before, or you're coming from another state, direct contracts, anywhere from 30 to 90 days, typically. Networking, of course, always takes longer because you have to get in network with the mother company first. So if we're signing up with Zealous, you first have to get in network with Zealous. Then they send their information out to the PPOs in their network, and it's up to them to then go in and add those providers in network. So it's a two-step process. So that's why it can just take longer.
All right, we're going to go with two more questions for tonight. Okay. If we did not get to your question, please feel free to email info@unitasdental.com. Their team will be happy to assist you. All right. Another common one we always get is, can we get out of an umbrella network?
Yeah, absolutely. Just know that, like we talked about, you might not necessarily be going out of network because you may be just moving over to something else. But yeah, you're not beholden to anything. You can drop anything you want at any time. The contract never specifies a specific amount of time or a penalty if you decide to term with them. Just understand that most of the time it's a 90-day process. With the exception of Dentamax, they're super weird. They'll give you like 2 weeks maybe that you're out of network with Dentamax itself, but we know there's no Dentamax patients. They're just all in network, but then it can take them months for the under PPOs to process that whole out of network. So it can be a little misleading for you to think when you're given a term date from a network umbrella company, because it will take longer than that for the PPOs that are accessing you through that relationship to take you out of network.
All right, we're going to end with a fun one tonight.
All right.
Can you give us an example of a great role play scenario for an out-of-network communication with a patient?
I would not necessarily, but I would just say try multiple. I mean, you people deal with patients all the time. So you kind of know the different kinds of patients that you get. You have the ones that are going to love you no matter what. And, oh, we totally understand. And that's not a big deal. I would say it's helpful. So to think of the different kinds of patients that you might have and practice with how you think they might react to that or how you are going to communicate to that. I also will do a plug here for Front Office Rocks. They're a great resource that has for a lot of different educational pieces, and they have some specific videos and examples of pretending to talk to patients about going in network, or that phone call, talking to that patient out of network. So I don't have a specific one. I would just say practice as though you have different kinds of reactions, knowing the patients that you have, because once you get used to saying it, then it becomes easier, even with a difficult patient or someone that's, upset that you've made this decision. It's just something that makes it more natural for you and comfortable doing it with confidence, so that they understand. First and foremost, again, it's not that their insurance is bad, it just doesn't pay well. And maybe you can tell them, call your HR and tell them, my dentist is dropping this PPO because it doesn't pay very well. Maybe we should look at going with a different PPO, or something else altogether with the HSA or something like that. Empower them to do something, or, suggest something like that. Make sure that they know you can still come here, and maybe even find out ahead of time what their out of network, out of pocket might be and how that's going to affect them. But just be prepared to answer those questions. Be prepared that some are going to be upset. But if you're an established provider and your patients love you, or they love the hygienist, or, the front office or whatever, then, to them, okay, fine. So it's going to cost me $20 extra to come get my teeth cleaned. I don't care, because this, location's convenient. You guys are clean and friendly. I feel safe here at my dentist's office, things like that. All those things really go a long way for a patient, outside of just that, out of pocket or what it might cost to them. There's a lot of other factors that go into play. And you have some that really are just going to always look at the bottom line no matter what. But like I said, a lot of our offices will say, it's funny how often we see those patients come back. So if you're that kind of provider, if you're that kind of office, then it's something that you may just want to start with, maybe a less significant PPO, and try that on for size, and then, move your way. But that goes to having the plan of how you're going to go in network. I wouldn't start with your biggest, hugest PPO. I would start with something that, like I said, is going to be really palatable for you to go out of network, and worst case scenario, none of those patients come back, and no new patients from that PPO call, that you're going to be just fine.
Perfect. Well, thank you to all the night owls on the East Coast staying a little late with us tonight. We
Yes.
certainly appreciate that. And of course, thank you for all the questions. And Christy, thank you for your time as well.
My pleasure.
Like I said, email info@unitasdental.com or www.unitashsd.com for your complimentary consultation. This webinar was recorded, so it'll be available within 1 week. Keep your eye out for that email. If you're interested in attending future Henry Schein webinars, visit henryscheindental.com/webinars for our upcoming schedule. Thanks for attending, and have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, Adam. Good night.